Good morning, everybody.
Morning. Morning.
Just saving our image PowerPoint for today, which I just finished. I always forget to do that. And then I'm like, oh, this is so important. I want to make sure I do it. So, alrighty. So today we're having our discussion day about evolutionary psychology and behavioral genetics. So we have some exercises we're going to do first. And then we will dive into an assignment discussing the readings you did for today, which are obviously very different. Alrighty. So let me actually see. I think I can screen share one of these activities for you. So give me a second here. All right. I can't find it for some reason, even though I know it exists in my files. So I'll just go ahead and read these to you. So one of the weird things that evolutionary psychology does is that it looks at sort of not only mate selection, but who deserves to live or who is most likely to live if we think of things purely from a survivorship of the species perspective, which I know is odd and interesting to kind of think about, or maybe disturbing to some of you, and that is fine. Yeah, I don't know what happened to my copy of this handout. I have my physical copy though, so we'll just use that. All right, so I'm going to give you a whole host of scenarios, and then just like for yourself, or in your notes, in your open up a Word document, however you want to do it, respond. And then I will give you sort of the evolutionary psych take on it when we're done. So I'm going to just give you scenarios. None of these are good. None of these are things that will make you happy to think about. Just sort of heads up on that. Sorry, you're getting reflection of my ring light, which is really distracting. And just sort of take it at face value as an exercise we're doing. So number one, you are on a boat that overturns. It contains your 5-year-old and 1-year-old children of the same biological sex. The boat sinks and you can only save one. Whom do you choose to save? Do you save the 5-year-old or the 1-year-old? So just write down either 5-year-old or 1-year-old. So now you're on another boat. You maybe shouldn't go on boats. I don't know. And it contains your 40-year-old and 20-year-old children, again, both of the same sex. Neither can swim. Bad, bad, bad. Should have gotten them swim lessons, right? And as the boat sinks, whom do you choose to save? Do you save the 40-year-old or the 20-year-old? So again, just write down 40 or 20 here. Okay, next. Would you rather marry, or have you married if you're married, someone older or younger than yourself? So just write down older or younger. And that's 3 if you're following along the numbers.
Can you repeat that one?
Yeah. Would you rather marry someone older or younger than you? This binder I have is gigantic, so I'm actually just gonna pull these out. Make it a little easier. There we go. Now I'm like not accidentally pressing buttons on my keyboard. All right, so for the next one, I'm going to throw some stuff in the chat because it's too much to remember. So I'm going to give you 6 characteristics and choose your top 3 in a partner, a mate. Remember, we use the word mate in evolutionary psych. So I spelled that wrong, but good financial prospects. So good financial prospects, good looks, a caring and responsible personality, physical attractiveness, ambition, and an exciting personality. So choose the top 3 out of those 6 to find in a mate.
What would be the difference between good looks and physical attractiveness?
As I was typing it, I was trying to figure out myself. So good question, Anya. I think probably good looks is facial attractiveness, whereas physical attractiveness is bodily attractiveness. But yeah, they do seem sort of interchangeable. So if you want, you can choose one of those and then choose other ones. Try to get the best of both worlds. All right, so number 5 here. You and your spouse are parents of a new child. The grandparents are ecstatic. Who do you think will be kinder to the child? The mother of the mother or the mother of the father? So your maternal grandmother or your paternal grandmother of the child. And again, this one seems weird. Just go with it. Choose one. Dad's mom or mom's mom. Yes. So you and your spouse have a new kid. Who do you think will be happier or kinder to the child? Will it be, assuming you are female, your mom, or, you know, assuming you're a male, your mom? So essentially, is it the child's paternal grandmother or the child's maternal grandmother? I know it's weird. It's all weird. It's fine. Okay, the next one, I also have to put some stuff in the chat for you. So I'm doing that right now. All right, so who will mourn more at the death of a child? So A, is it the mother versus the father? B, is it the parents of the father versus the parents of the mother? And C, younger parents versus older parents. Again, awful question, right? But for the sake of argument, pick one from each pair, A, B, and C. All right, last horrible question. So this is 7, and it also has an A and a B. So which will elicit more grief? And again, choose one from each pair. Is it A, the death of a son versus, or for A, is it the death of a son or is it the death of a daughter? Or for B, is it the death of an unhealthy child or is it the death of a healthy child? And I have the answers we'll talk about here in a minute.
Dr. Myers, will you repeat number 6 again? I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah, they're all weird, so it's fine. All right, so number 6 is who will mourn more at the death of a child from each of those pairs?
Oh, are the pairs in the chat?
Yeah, the pairs are the A, B, and C. In the
Okay, perfect.
All right. So as you all are wrapping up, I'll start explaining. So these are basic principles of evolutionary psych. According to evolutionary psychologists, all organisms, including humans, are gene-producing machines. That's up a little bit on me. With the basic motivation of perpetuating their own genetic pool. In short, our genes predispose us to act in ways that enhance their chances of surviving and spreading. And this fundamental motive underlies all our behavior. So for questions 1 and 2, respondents are more likely to choose the 5-year-old and the 20-year-old. And the argument is some children die between the ages of 1 and 5, and 5-year-olds are therefore more likely to reproduce. And similarly, a 20-year-old is more likely to reproduce than a 40-year-old. So the other idea is that ultimately it's mating that perpetuates the genetic pool. So for females, reproductive capacities are limited to approximately 25 children. Not many people go that far, right? We all kind of like at the Duggars who had 21 or whatever it was, 20. But for males, reproduction potential is technically limitless, right? If all the guy did was just have sex all day, every day with lots of different fertile women, he could have almost infinite children. So the idea is that because of the female's greater investment in each child, she must be careful to select a mate who will help her when child rearing, and the male must simply choose females who can bear children. So in response to question 3, it says that females should prefer to mate with older males because they'll have more resources, and males should prefer to mate with younger females because they're more likely to give birth. Take that as you will. Every woman in my family is married to a guy younger than her. So, you know, there's that. And in response,
So am I.
yeah, it's common, right? And then for question 4, the idea is that women should choose traits that concern resources, caring, and responsibility, or men should choose traits that relate to sexual preoccupations. It actually uses the terms females and males, which I think is dehumanizing, so I'm sort of refusing to use those terms. And in fact, APA tells us not to use those terms. Females have the advantage of knowing that any child they bear is definitely theirs. And the male must determine that the female has really given birth to his child. So in response to question 5, the idea was that the maternal grandparents should be especially happy and especially kind because they have this like 25% genetic carryover for sure, right? That makes a lot of assumptions about mistrust, right? And the greater investment in a child that we give, the more likely that child is to grow up, go on and reproduce and pass down the genes. And the idea is then the greater experience negative emotion at death. So in response to question 6, the idea was that the greater grief should be experienced by the mother, parents of the mother, and older parents who are less likely to reproduce again. And 7, grief is greatest for the death of a healthy male child. I think it's bupkis, right? And I'm sure a lot of you are having that reaction too. So feel free to, you know, throw it in the chat or unmute yourself. What are your reactions to this?
For me, I was raised in a more maternal culture than a paternal culture. So like for the characteristics, I chose the caring and responsible because I think everybody wants someone who is caring and responsible. But I also picked like exciting personality and attraction. Like those things are important to me. But yeah, I was a little biased towards mother of everything.
For 6, I felt like maybe the father might have more grace because like, I don't know, I feel like mothers are like more like out there, like, oh, I'm devastated, but fathers are always trying to like support everyone else and they kind of like hold their end. So I feel like they like grieve like more or longer because they don't like openly grieve.
Yeah, that's a really good point, sort of considering the social mores around grief, right? I think that's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong if you chose the evolutionary ones because they're relevant to you, right? That's totally fine. But yeah, this makes a lot of assumptions, right? This assumes that the men are going to be the primary breadwinners, when in fact, 50% of all US households, I think over 50% now, the woman is either the primary or co-breadwinner, right? It makes assumptions that everyone's heterosexual, right? It makes assumptions that children will be born in the quote unquote normal way, which is really not the case anymore, right? A lot of even like traditional heterosexual couples have to get support from the medical profession, for example, to have children. The next exercise I typically do, but I think it'd be a little logistically hard, so I'm going to skip it, but just explain it to you, is I typically have people break up into pairs, and I give them a giant list of similarities. You can see how long it is. And I just ask them to get to know that person and see how many of those things they have in common. And what we find is typically the pairs who are, you know, just two students in the class, they might not even know each other that well, right? Have somewhere on the order of, you know, 10 to 17 of these traits in common. And there's things that range from like toothpaste brand to how many family members you have, you know, whether you're right or left-handed, things like that. And the reason I do that is because one of the things that's exactly, what about adoptions too, Miranda? That's a really good point. One of the things that people do to argue for evolutionary psychology is look at these stories of twins separated at birth. And they'll always be like, they were both wearing a rubber band on their left wrist when they met, and they had similar haircuts. And it's like, okay, but look how similar you are to this person who might be a complete stranger to you and shares no genetic material that you know of, right? So again, skepticism is healthy, right? Okay, so real quick before we break into groups to do the assignment, I am going to pull up our image PowerPoint just so you can see our authors for today. All right. So this is David Buss. He does evolutionary psych. He especially focuses on this human mating stuff we've been talking about. This is Alice Eagley and Wendy Wood, who's the co-author on her articles. I've actually seen Eagley speak at APA. She's incredible. She's actually retired now, but she taught both psychology and gender and sexuality studies, so kindred spirit, since I also teach in WGS. She does meta-analyses where she looks at data overall, comparing men and women, and tends to find a lot of the differences wash out. And Wood studies habits, so a lot of the like cognitive social learning stuff we just talked about, and also gender differences and similarities. Steven Pinker is at Harvard, and he not only does evolutionary psychology, he also looks at language. And then Ruth Howard is my new addition this year. She is the first African-American woman to get a PhD in psychology, which is completely badass. I also just love, I mean, this wouldn't happen today, just with the review process, that like, if you look at the footnote on the first page, it says that, you know, we received it and published it immediately. Like they didn't give it back to her with revisions. It's kind of like mind blowing. But the fact that like, even though she's an African-American woman, they did that in 1945, which is really, really cool. And she looked at cultural diversity, respect for all people, development, as we saw here. Alrighty. So one more thing, I promise we're going to get into groups in a minute here, but that I want to screen share with you. Find it real quick. I think I closed it. And I will send you all, if you want to read the whole argument, the whole article later, I will email it to you all as well. One of the things that came out when the Epstein case came out. So if you're not familiar with Jeffrey Epstein, he was a really awful person who was engaged in essentially sex trafficking with underage women and made them available to a lot of politicians, other famous people, including scientists, really like, anyway, there are bad people everywhere, is essentially what this showed you. But what this goes into is he and Pinker were actually buds and hung out together. There is testimony from one of Epstein's victims that said that she was told to like keep Pinker happy when he visited. Essentially, this underage woman was told to have sex with Pinker and did. You know, here they're giving how Epstein sort of justified what he did based on evolutionary psych. So Pinker talking about men being biologically predisposed to aggression, violent competition over women, and rape. And Epstein had this idea that was sort of a eugenic, no, not even sort of, it was a eugenics idea, that essentially he wanted to like repopulate the human race with his own sperm, his own DNA. So cool. So that just gives you an interesting perspective as you think about evolutionary psych. And let's say I will, like I said, while you all are in your groups, I will send you that article. You don't have to read it now, but just if you're interested later. That certainly doesn't discredit all of evolutionary psych or all of psychology or all of linguistics, right? But it certainly is something that we need to keep in mind when we're reading Pinker's work in particular, right? Even though this particular work that that you have in your pieces book doesn't get into as many of those things. Alrighty, so I am going to assign you to breakout rooms for 20 minutes. Oh, it'd help if I share the assignment first. So let me do that really quickly here. And I did make sure you all should be able to access it today. Okay, there we go. Alrighty. Just the time, the 20 minutes. And I'm opening all the rooms. So use the question, ask for help if you need me. If not, I'll see you in 20 minutes.
Dr. Myers, what does your shirt say? I'm speaking.
Just as I'm speaking.
Oh, it just says I'm speaking.
Kamala Harris said to Mike Pence during the debate. Sure.
I like it.
Alrighty, welcome back, everybody. Okay, so not gonna go through each question, but just overall impressions of behavioral genetics and evolutionary psych that your group discussed, or just that you have personally.
For the most part, we basically concluded that while it does have validity, there are so many factors to consider that you just can't completely rule out, like sociological things or economic factors or cultural factors, which is why we really like the study that included the 37 different cultures.
Yeah, it's really important to do that, right? And I also loved that in the Howard study that you read from Blackboard, right? The fact that she was saying, like, these were people from rural settings, these were people from low socioeconomic status, like, and so we can't say this is genetic because it is, you know, we know that those factors can influence it. I mean, she's really before her time because a lot of psychologists didn't really acknowledge that till I would say the 70s. And honestly, there are still some psychologists who won't acknowledge that today. Like, no, the social things don't matter. Oh my God, did you take a psychology class in your life, right? Other reactions?
I didn't much care for David Buss's article, mostly because we all kind of felt it made like a pretty solid conclusion without identifying different perspectives, like multicultural perspectives, or you know, for instance, polyamory and polygamy, and the idea that it's just like multi-woman, one man, and that's not how it is in all cultures. And so the focus on just like white Americans were like, maybe not.
Yeah, that's a really good point that, you know, when we try to get into describing behavior with genetics, we miss all those cultural factors if, you know, if we're not like Howard and don't take them into account, or like you were saying, if we don't have studies that look across different cultures. Yeah, exactly what you all are saying. The fact that these things are made by white Americans, right? For white Americans, and ignores other cultures, right? And, you know, obviously we know evolutionary theory is a thing with tons of evidence behind it, right? I'm never discrediting that. If we just look at that and we look at non-human animals, right? Like, these things don't hold for non-human animals. There's plenty of evidence for pansexual or bisexual behavior within the animal world as well. Bonobos, who are our closest genetic relatives, I think they share something like 98% of our DNA. Bonobo chimps, they just have sex with whoever, whenever. It's like a way of communicating, essentially, right? So to assume that, you know, there's one way of mating for anyone, much less people who are more complex, right? Yeah, definitely. We probably have time for one more point. Anyone have something they're really itching to say?
I feel like they were like inconsistent. Like, I don't know, like the theory itself is inconsistent. And like, of course, like you realize like, you know, your family in general on one side may be like really loud, and, you know, you just all have like kind of, you know, that trait. But at the same time, like I've been friends with twins and they're like absolutely nothing alike, and they have same parents, same environment, grew around the same stuff. But then there's also some that are like exactly the same, and they dress similar and talk similar, for like have the same personality like their whole lives. So I don't know, I feel like sometimes it does apply and sometimes it doesn't.
I think there are really weird instances too that I've like read about in articles where twins who were separated at birth went on to live like completely identical lives down to like their spouses and their pets' names and stuff. But those are really more the rarity than they are a commonplace.
Right. And like I said, when we do that activity in class, you know, again, when it's more logistically possible, we find people who have no genetic similarities, who have grown up differently, that share very similar things as well. So yeah, I think those are really good points that both of you made, for sure. Alrighty, and one thing I do want to make sure I say is that obviously I'm skeptical of this theory, but there are plenty of people who endorse it. There are plenty of other things besides mating behavior it looks at. that it makes a lot of sense for, like why we're more afraid of like spiders than a gun, right? Even though the gun is more likely to kill us, because evolutionarily, right, the spider was likely to kill us if it was venomous. And Dr. Marterell teaches a whole class about this. If you'll be here in the fall, she'll teach it then. So definitely, if you're interested, if you're piqued in the interest by this, take her class. She also teaches cross-cultural psychology, right? So she's a nice mix of things. I think all of us in our department are, honestly. And then my last thing to say today is reminder, no class Wednesday. None, no class Wednesday. Take a breather after the election, and, you know, sleep in or do whatever other work you need to do. And then your exam is on Friday. So if you have questions as you work on the take home, or if you, you know, have any questions as you look over the review guide that's posted on Blackboard, please just feel free to email me or set up a Calendly appointment. All right, everybody have a good day. Vote if you haven't already. Be safe while you do it. And I will see you all on Friday for the exam.
Bye.
Bye.
So in my group, we're talking about the my genome thing. And like I brought up that in my family, like we come from warrior tribes, and everyone in my family was in the military. I have uncles who were code talkers. I joined the military. My dad joined the military. Cool. And I'm like, but I don't know what trait that would be. Like, I think it's more of like a cultural thing instead of like a trait thing, like a genome thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly other traits that go into it, right? Like loyalty and patriotism and things like that. But yeah, you're right. It's not just one trait. And that's something else about all these theories of psychology, right? Is that like one thing can't explain everything.
Right. And then my aunt was LaDonna Harris. And I don't know if you know who she is, but she's one of the like leaders of the American Indian movement.
Oh,
and cool. Like one of my ancestors was Quanah Parker, who founded the Native American Church. And like I campaigned for the missing and murdered Indigenous women, but it's like, I don't know, like I said, probably a cultural thing too. But yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. That's incredible. And what a cool lineage to come from. That's awesome.
Have a good, rest of the week until Friday.
Sounds good. You too.
Okay. We like schedule at a different time, or like I wasn't really sure what.
If you don't mind, just because I only have about a half hour between this class and my next one, and that's when I squeeze in my lunch. That would,
yeah, no, that's fine.
Even schedule if you want. Shoot me an email. We could even meet at like class time on Wednesday.
Okay.
But yeah,
all right,
check my calendar, see if there's something that works for you, and if not, we can do class time on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.